All right, we are live, and no, Brian has not gotten a haircut and changed his look. Special guest this week, Steve Laidlaw. This isn't the actual show. This is the pre-show where I say hi to the people watching live. But hey, Steve, thanks for joining.
Oh, a pleasure to be here, and shout out to the folks watching live.
Now I'm so used to hearing your voice when I'm going for walks from the Steve Laidlaw podcast. And now it's like, I know I've talked to you before on the podcast, but now I'm getting like a whole new experience after like guesting on yours and then listening to you so much recently. But okay, I should say that for the show. Okay, so I'm going to start the actual show. All right, ready to go. One take show. It's going to be amazing. Thanks, by the way. Yeah, thanks everyone watching live. Very much appreciate you being here. Mathieu, hello. Okay. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who have been talking about Pius Suter ever since like Labor Day. I'm your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me this week, not my regular co-host, Brian Combe. He is a bit under the weather, taking a sick day, but instead, we've got a ringer for you. You know him from Dobber Hockey, and this past year, he's jumped into the hockey podcasting fray with the aptly named Steve Laidlaw podcast. And I actually joined episode of the Steve Laidlaw podcast to redraft the 2008 NHL draft and stump for Erik Karlsson over Steven Stamkos as the best player in the draft. His name, of course, as you guessed from the name of the podcast, Steve Laidlaw. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Elon. We like to pass the puck back and forth from time to time, and it's my turn to share it. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I knew when Brian's away, I need to bring in someone who I know I could just throw a ton of players at and know that they'll have great takes on all of them. And you are always up for the job. I already messed up, actually, because I just learned today that Pius Suter, that's not actually how you pronounce his name. Apparently, it's Pew or Pew, like, and like the S at the end is silent. I just learned that today when seeing highlights from this hat trick that he had. So that's lesson one from Keeping Karlsson today.
This is all news to me.
Pia, I think. So I guess, yeah, it's like a French name with a silent S. So there you go. All right.
Petit Pia.
Pew, pew, pew. Okay, so we've got a really fun show coming, a lot to break down, including, of course, a very big trade. Before we get to it, let's, of course, mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com. Top fantasy hockey website in the world. Great articles every day, every once in a while, even from Steve himself. Plus, I love the tools over at Frozen Tools to help me prepare the show and plan my fantasy leagues. Like, I love the real-time line combos. Everything about it. It's awesome. So Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, make sure to check it out. But okay, let's get going and dig into this wild trade that happened last week. The Columbus Blue Jackets had a disgruntled center. The Winnipeg Jets had a disgruntled winger. They said, let's make a deal. And now Pierre-Luc Dubois has been traded to the Winnipeg Jets with a 2022 third-round pick in exchange for Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic. And then Roslovic signed a contract afterwards for 2 years, around $2 million per year. So everyone's happy now. Let's start on the Jets to break down this trade. We're going to have to wait 2 weeks for Dubois to quarantine before making his debut, I believe. Dubois has hovered around a 60-point pace for the last couple of seasons, but showed a glimpse of more upside. He put up 10 points in 10 games in the playoffs last summer. Now he goes from the line juggling Jackets to likely a stable situation on the Jets. I'd imagine he's going to be centering the second line. On Saturday, the Jets had Scheifele, Wheeler, Connor as the top line, then Stastny, Ehlers, and Andrew Kopp on the second line. So got to imagine the two options are Dubois bumps Stastny to center the third line, and then Andrew Kopp. That would be great for him because he gets to hold that line 2 spot and play with Dubois and Ehlers. And Kopp, by the way, 2 goals on Saturday, so good for him and could be a good short-term had. Or I guess the other option is Stastny stays on the second line and maybe jumps to the wing. I don't know, maybe Dubois jumps to the wing himself. Then, of course, on the power play, Laine's spot has been taken by Stastny with Laine out recently because, of course, Nikolai Ehlers is destined to never get a sniff of the top power play. The Jets just don't have that in their future at all, it seems. But Laine scored a power play goal from power play 2 on Saturday, for what it's worth. Anyways, so perhaps Stastny holds that spot, or maybe it's an obvious placeholder for Pierre-Luc Dubois. So this is all speculation, of course, and we have a long time to wait. But Steve, how do you see the Jets' lines in power play shaking out when Dubois arrives?
I think the line changes. That top line is almost certainly going to stick together, and then where Dubois ends up shaking out, I think it's a really good spot for him if he's paired up with Ehlers. We already saw him team up with a Danish winger in Oliver Bjorkstrand in Columbus. That worked pretty well. Ehlers is like supercharged version of that. These guys are two fantastic transition players. Dubois has this reputation of being really good defensively, but you look at the analytics and his offense actually shines a little bit more. So they've got really enviable depth at the center position now. And I think that sets up the Jets to be a little bit more higher scoring. And I think it's a really good spot for Dubois just going to the Canadian division and getting out of the Central division where there's some big defensive teams. He's not going to get to beat up on Chicago or Detroit, but he is going to get to beat up on Ottawa, as we saw last night. That's a team that can be beat up on. So, but the power play is really what everyone cares about. And I got to be honest, I don't know how this thing all shakes out for them because, as you mentioned, Ehlers, he's never going to sniff that top power play unit. But with Laine out of the lineup, they've completely inverted how they're running things. So now Scheifele is on the left wall where Laine was playing, but they're having him play with the puck a little bit more. And they've moved Kyle Connor over to where Blake Wheeler was. And they've got him setting up as the shooter on that line instead of being the net front guy. And now Wheeler is playing below the goal line as kind of a net front guy. And they had Stasny in the bumper. So is Dubois going to step in as a bumper guy, or are they going to put him on power play 2 and try to juice that unit a little bit more and keep Stasny with his veteran savvy and quick thinking on that top power play unit? It's going to be really interesting, but the unit's completely flipped on its axis, quite literally. And so how it all shakes out is going to be really intriguing going forward. The only thing you can really bank on, Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, everything else is kind of in limbo.
Yeah, you're right. Because another big impact of Laine being injured is they've switched things up, and Josh Morrissey has been on the top power play instead of Neil Pionk, and that has obviously sent Neil Pionk fantasy managers into a bit of a tizzy. And yeah, Stasny did well. He scored a power play goal yesterday from that like spot that like you were saying in the slot, and it was like seemed like they had things set up really well. Of course, it's against Ottawa, so I don't want to read too much into it. But yeah, I guess that's going to make the difference between if Dubois is like he'll still be great. Like Nikolai Ehlers still gets a ton of points even though he's not on the top power play, but obviously his fantasy upside is somewhat capped. But Dubois was capped before just from being on Columbus, so maybe it all evens out and Dubois' fantasy value stays kind of the same, or like the upside could be really huge if he does get on that top power play. And yeah, speaking of those defensemen, like do you think that Josh Morrissey, because he's still not rostered in like a lot of fantasy leagues, he's still got a lot of leagues on Yahoo where he's available for people to add. We've been getting questions over the week of like, should I add Morrissey? Also people asking if they should drop Neil Pionk. Like Pionk was so great on the top power play last year, but if you remember going into last season, it was supposed to be Josh Morrissey's job. So now he's getting another crack at it. Morrissey had 2 assists versus the Sens on Tuesday, but those are his only points of the season and no power play points so far. So do you think that Morrissey holds that job and gets that extra fantasy value, or do you think maybe that can change? Or is it just like your last answer, which is it's really hard to predict what's going to happen with the Jets power play, especially with a new piece coming in?
It's really hard to predict, but reading on Twitter, Corey Snyder, he's the one of the tracking project, the zone entries and exits and all that stuff. And he had some phenomenal info out on Twitter today about where the passes came from on all of Laine's power play goals during his time in Winnipeg. And basically last season, the cross seam pass from Wheeler to Laine evaporated. I think they got 1 goal out of it all of last season. And so there was some speculation that this is probably because they lost Dustin Byfuglien and his big shot on the point, drawing that gravity towards him and opening up that seam pass, whereas Pionk just not a shot threat at all, right? And like I don't know, it's this funny dichotomy because you don't want your defenseman shooting. That's like the worst shot that you can have. But at the same time, if you don't have a shot threat on the point, then it reduces everything else because everything collapses in on itself and you're just passing the puck around the top and you're not generating anything. Whereas you can really open things up with that shot threat. And so, like, is it Morrissey? Is he a shot threat? I don't know. I think that this team is still looking for who that guy is going to be long term. Could it be Ville Heinola? Maybe not this year, but like I'm sure people would love to see it. I don't know. This team, they're still thin on defense, and I think they're crying out to find an option, kind of the way that the Calgary Flames, Mark Giordano started washing up last season. And so they go out at the deadline and trade for Eric Gustafson. And he was awesome for them for like a half minute until the season ended, right?
Right.
And so this is a team that could really benefit from that type of addition. Just like give them a spark plug, give them something different. But are they just too thin on defense in general to have a guy who's just a third pairing power play specialist, or are they the exact team that needs that type of thing because they really don't have anything else?
Well, I know that the Florida Panthers have a power play specialist that they're currently trying to unload. I wonder if something couldn't work out there. But yeah,
Yeah, Keith Yandel's definitely waiving his no move clause to go to Winnipeg. That's happening.
I guess that's true. Well, hey, if they're going to threaten to ruin his Iron Man streak, I don't know. It seems like they maybe have some leverage over him. But yeah, I feel kind of bad for the people who reached for Neil Pionk in drafts this year, assuming they were going to get the same as last year, like this top power play guy who also gets great peripherals. Not a sure thing right now. He's off right now. I'd hold on if I had him. Especially since he is helping you in those peripheral categories, but it is a bit of a bummer that you lost that guarantee. We'll see how Morrissey does over the next little while, and probably things will all get shaken up once Dubois arrives. And like I said, Andrew Kopp is the guy for your super deep leagues. Take a look at him because he scored 2 goals yesterday, and if he's going to stick on that second line, well, you still have to wait 2 weeks anyway. So even regardless, add him now for those 2 weeks if he's available. Get him with Ehlers and Stasny. They had a good game yesterday against the Sens, and like you said, this Canadian division, it seems like there could be lots of goals scored. So you want anyone in an offensive situation on the Jets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just one last thing on Pionk. Like if we're talking buy, sell, hold, trade, all that stuff, like it's all
That's
dependent on
everything.
what's available, right? We're going to talk about some defensemen who are under-owned, right?
Yeah.
And if you could swap Pionk for an under-owned guy who's in a huge opportunity spot, like Rasmus Anderson, who has claimed that top power play spot in Calgary, then you go and do that. But like if you're doing it to chase some third pairing defense, like if you're doing it to go chase Eric Gustafson, who had a couple of points in the opening week of the season, but is kind of crappy and not playing on the top power play in Philly, then maybe you don't do that. So it's all dependent on what you're chasing.
So interesting, right? Because I think if Brian was here, he'd say that you drafted Pionk high and Anderson was a late pick. I'm talking about Rasmus Anderson. So maybe you like don't want to pull the trigger on that so quickly. Maybe you want to let things stabilize a little bit longer. But you're saying, and I think I might lean to you, and I don't want to speak for Brian. Maybe he would be totally on Team Anderson over Team Pionk.
No, we're
But
throwing Brian under the bus here. That's what we're doing.
that sounds like fun. Yeah, I mean, I think especially in a shortened season, I don't think you have time to have too much patience. Like Rasmus Anderson just got his 4th point in his 4th game today, another power play assist. So yeah, I think at this point, it's crazy to say, but I think if you can swap Pionk for Rasmus Anderson, maybe you do it. Rasmus Anderson, the #1 scoring Rasmus defenseman in the NHL right now, and that's not what a lot of people would have predicted going into the season. And we'll talk about another one that's struggling a little bit later on. But let's cover the Columbus
I
side.
think Ristolainen's giving him a run for his money. I'm not going to lie.
I believe they were tied. Like, Ristolainen got a couple points to get him to 3 points on the season in quite a few more games, but then Rasmus Anderson is now up to 4 with that assist. But yeah, it could be close. I'd hope that Dahlin is going to give both of them a run for their money. That's what should happen. But we'll discuss them. Okay.
Elon, the Rasmus rankings are like they change minute to minute. It's really hard to keep up with them.
Yeah, it's true. Are there any more? I think for tonight we're good. Like I think that this episode's going to come out tomorrow morning and nothing will have changed. So nothing will be out of date, as opposed to like a bunch of other players we're about to talk about, because we're recording this on Sunday at 7 p.m. and there's about to be a huge slate of games. Which the reason why we record Keeping Karlsson on Sunday night and not on Saturday night is we want to give you up-to-date news going into your new week. Usually Sunday's a slow night, but not this week. So hopefully most of the things you hear on this episode won't be out of date. But yeah, I want to cover the Columbus side of this trade, and then as you can hear, we're bursting at the seams of other players we want to talk about. But yeah, Columbus. So Laine should be able to play in a week. Apparently he's healthy from his injury, and that's all it'll take for him to go to the States and do whatever COVID quarantine that's required. And good luck to us, right? Trying to predict how the lines will shake out on Columbus, especially since like whatever we say, they're likely to change a few times before stabilizing, if at all. So we can just try to guess what's going to happen. But Tortorella always keeps us on his Tortorella always keeps us on our toes. Let's start on the power play there. So clearly Laine becomes the trigger man of this power play that's been terrible for a while now. They were the 27th ranked power play last year. On one hand, you could go, man, this sucks for Patrick Laine, right? He goes from such a good power play to a really terrible one. But of course, if you want to look at it more glass half full, you can say, well, Laine is going to help turn this thing around because they have some talented players, right? Like I'm imagining a power play of like Laine, Bjorkstrand, Atkinson, maybe throw in one of their centers, I don't know, Domi or something, and then like Seth Jones or Werenski, or maybe have both D there. Like these are talented players. You'd think they should be able to have a good 5-on-4 team, at least in theory. So we'll have to see how Laine fits with the rest of them. But you know, guys, I'm the one thing that I think I'm happy about is I have Seth Jones on one of my fantasy teams, and he's been kind of struggling this season. So I'm hoping that the power play gets stronger because of Laine, and that's going to help someone like Seth Jones maybe get more power play points. But yeah, do you think that it's a situation where Laine could help turn this power play around enough to not only keep up his production, but also help others like my poor Seth Jones, who had a sad empty net assist and in the last game, that's all he has for the season? Like, is Laine that good? Because, or is it going to be more like a Phil Kessel situation where we were hoping, you know, he'd go to Arizona and turn that power play around, but instead they just dragged him down with the rest of the team?
Well, it's worth pointing out with Kessel, he was hurt all of last season and he was playing through it because that's what these guys who have Ironman streaks do. And there was a bit of, I guess, consternation about that because they kind of wanted him to sit out because he wasn't helping. And so you look at what Kessel's done this year and he's, I mean, random variants and whatnot, but I think he's already up to 4 goals on the year. And so he started off hot, and you can see how an injury could take down a guy who that's their only one skill.
Okay, fair enough. I like analogies, even if they
for
don't
sure
perfectly
and
fit.
so to throw another one at you, what is the power of a shooter to a power play? Like we talked about the gravity effects of having a point shot versus not to open up that seam. And I'm going to use the Florida Panthers as an analogy here. Their power play was absolutely terrible until Mike Hoffman showed up. And then they've got this shooter, and suddenly they've got someone to feed. And now everything's opening up off of that. And they've got one of the best power plays in the league for a couple of years. And so far they've played the Chicago Blackhawks, so their power play hasn't really taken a hit this season, but remains to be seen what that power play is going to look like this year. So Laine goes to Columbus. What is the power of a shooter? How much is the gravity and how much of what he can offer that power play? How much is that going to mean for them? Because we're not certain that it's just the power of a single shooter that drives a power play. Like I think it sets a certain floor for that power play. I don't think they can be as terrible as they've been since that half season with Sam Gagner at the bumper that they were awesome at. They've been terrible since then. Like literally January 1st of that season, it stopped working and it hasn't worked since. So it's going to be better than that because of Laine, I would assume. But like, is he the plutonium in their flux capacitor? Is he giving them 1.21 gigawatts worth of power play explosion? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to fly back in time to the 1970s Montreal Canadiens power play. I don't know if they're hitting those levels. I really don't. So the opportunity is there, but like I think this kind of, it doesn't help Laine's cause because they had a well-oiled machine there in Winnipeg, and he could play on the second line and get cushier deployments. So it could help some other guys there. His gravity is going to help open some things up, but I don't know that this is going to vault him to that next level that he seemed to be wanting out of his time in Winnipeg.
Yeah, well, lucky for him, at least he's a free agent at the end of this season, so maybe he'll have an opportunity to try something else if it doesn't work out. But yeah, like I think people who have Patrick Laine on their fantasy teams are just even hoping for him to stay the same and not get like brought down into the bog that is the Columbus Blue Jackets offensive abilities. So maybe it's possible that he can help jumpstart that power play and keep his production at least where it was, but might be tough. Obviously not the best spot for him for offense. We'll see how it goes in terms of like better chance of going far in the playoffs. If you look at even strength, it becomes really hard to predict, right? Like all of a sudden Columbus becomes the new Minnesota Wild, where we have to like struggle to figure out who the number one center is going to be. You'd think like by name value, it would seem like Max Domi should be the guy, right? Like he is the one who came in the offseason. He's the one who's a former 70-point player. You would think he should be the one to get Laine as a winger and maybe turn a disappointing start to his season around. He only has 2 assists in 6 games. Obviously, getting Patrick Laine as a winger could only help. But so far, Domi's averaging under 15 minutes of time on ice per game. Seems like Tortorella is not the biggest fan, at least so far. So yeah, I was actually planning on calling Domi a snoozer on the show. Like before the trade, I was going to be asking Brian or yourself, like, should people just be dropping Domi? I guess now you hold on because Laine could come in and maybe turn things around. But I'd be a little bit concerned, or I think like people are like all of a sudden like, doing a victory lap, being like, oh, I knew Max Domi was going to be great, and now that he's getting Laine, things are going to be awesome. But I don't know. I'm not so sure. I'm actually kind of excited about someone like Alexandre Texier, who at 21 years old, he was centering Bjorkstrand and Jenner on Saturday. He's been receiving over 18 and a half minutes per game with Dubois out of the lineup. He's up to 5 points in 6 games now, all at even strength. And all of a sudden, like regardless of where Laine slots in, I think Texier now has got himself cementing like a lot of ice time and potentially a number one center role in terms of deployment. So I'm curious to get your take on like Domi and if he could turn things around if he gets Laine, and then also if you concur that Texier is someone that people should really be looking to add to their fantasy teams, because all of a sudden there's no one else that Tortorella could turn to for like a high ice time centerman.
Well, it's Tortorella, right? So Domi is not going to be getting the 20 minutes a night number one centerman treatment. It's not going to happen because that's not the type of player that he is. But Tortorella, like he kind of knows what you are. Like you remember when they had Sonny Milano and he's like, look, Sonny Milano, he's got to play in the offensive zone and play on the power play if we're going to use him. Like he understands what you are and what you can offer. It's just Sonny Milano like ultimately couldn't hack it. Like he seems like he's one of those tweeners. And now we'll see what he turns into in Anaheim. But as far as Domi goes, like that's a higher caliber player, and he's the best playmaker on the roster. So one would presume power play one, he's going to get a chance to make those passes to Laine across the seam. But we'll see what shakes out, because if he doesn't click, they're going to be looking for other options. And the bottom line is he's not going to be playing 20 minutes a night for Tortorella. So it's going to be other guys who are getting those minutes. It's going to be other guys closing the games when they have a lead, shooting on the empty net. It's not going to be Domi, and it's probably not going to be Laine. So concerns about the minutes opportunity for those guys. And it could just be another one of those Blue Jackets teams where there's not one point per game type player on the roster. And the closest thing to it's probably Bjorkstrand.
Yeah, I hear you. And Bjorkstrand's been playing with Texier. So yeah, I think this could be bad for Laine, right? If he's on a line with Domi and then they're like not used as much, then you're going to really have to hope that the power play is where he can feast. Yeah, the Elon Dubrovsky pick of the week for me, Alexandre Texier. Like I was already into him before, and now with Dubois out of the picture, I think regardless of where Laine slots in, I just like the fact that now Texier is going to get like this top center deployment. Okay, there's been a lot of cold players on Columbus that we've brought up, like Domi, Jones, and Werenski haven't done much. Actually, Cam Atkinson is a guy who I'm a bit concerned about, and maybe Laine even pushes him down the lineup. So maybe before I move forward, like, are you okay with giving the advice to people that at least in shallower leagues, like it's time to let Cam Atkinson go if you find someone appealing in free agency?
Yeah, again, it's all about what's out there, what's not.
Of
But
course,
like
yeah.
Atkinson was not a guy that I was investing in, and he's going to give you a ton of shots. And I mean, this team's in for an attitude adjustment, right? Like they basically sleepwalked through the start of the season because their number one center was pulling a sulk fest, and they sure looked like a crappy team. And then their number one centerman gets traded, and suddenly they're giving Tampa Bay Lightning all they can handle in a matinee game and took them to the cleaners. So I think we're going back to old Columbus Blue Jackets where they're going to be super difficult to play against. And I think that could help a lot of these guys, but like they're not going to be getting into a lot of 7-6 games. So
Yeah, I'm
And
with you.
that's gonna hurt your offense a little bit.
Yeah, I think Atkinson had that really good 40-goal season when he was playing with Panarin, and since then it's been a bit disappointing, and I don't see things changing this season. Okay, so I've got some other cold players I want to run by you, and yeah, later on in the show we'll talk about some guys that maybe might be available for people to add as free agents, and so then we can compare them with them then. But first of all, I just want to get your like level of panic. Like if you had this person on your fantasy team, are you like freaking out, or are you like don't even worry about it? And I've got to start in Vancouver. I'm pretty sure you're not going to say to drop this guy, but in general, by the way, the Canucks not having a great start to the season, right? They lost 5-2 to the Habs on Saturday. Their record is now 2-5 on the year. And one reason for them struggling out of the gate has got to be due to their superstar center, Elias Pettersson, looking in need of a tune-up. Like his goal yesterday was his first of the season, bringing him to only 2 points in 7 games. This is a guy who put up 66 points in 68 games last season. That's an 80-point pace. And then he had 18 points in 17 playoff games. I was salivating. We all were like expecting, like, what can he do now? Like as he gets a year older. And so far, it's a whole lot of nothing. And sure, you can make the excuse that he lost JT Miller for a couple of games while he was in COVID protocol, but Miller's been back for 4 games now. Miller's been doing just fine, by the way. 4 assists in those 4 games, 3 of those on the power play. But Pettersson not scoring any of those goals that Miller's been assisting on. It's mostly been Bo Horvat taking those Miller passes and popping them in the net. So what is your take on Pettersson at this point, Steve? Like, are you still, well, I shouldn't say you, but like, should we still be expecting whatever we were expecting going into the season and just write this off as a cold stretch? Or is there some reason for concern that you're seeing?
Well, he's at this point in his career where he's trying to make that leap from star to I can carry a team superstar. And he was close to doing it for a lot of last season. And it seems like he's trying to do even more than that this season. And the Canucks probably need it because they're even thinner than they were last season. And they don't have the goaltending to lean on. So now suddenly huge saves that were being made and the game's transitioning back the other way, or shots are being made that completely miss the net, and now the game's transitioning back the other way. They're ending up in the back of their net. And so now they're having to start back from square one, trying to generate offense instead of counterattacking super aggressively, like we saw in the Vegas series. It was just Vegas basically hammering on a nail for 7 games, and Vancouver being like, you tried too hard to hammer that nail, and then counterattacking them for a brief chance. And that was the only way that they could generate offense. And I think that this season we're seeing an even thinner team, a team that's not as good defensively, and their goaltending, frankly, stinks. And the result of that is they're getting into a lot of fire wagon hockey, which should help his point totals eventually, but like it's not going off to the same degree that you would have hoped and I thought we might see. But progression isn't always linear for players, but like panic level, no, like he'll still be in and around a point per game by the end of the season.
Okay, so if there are people in your fantasy league that are at the panic level, maybe now's a good time to reach out with an offer because I'm with you. Probably like he should be able to get back to a point per game there in that high scoring division. And like you say, I guess if the Canucks do have to play more of a run and gun game because they don't have a good defensive system, that, like you said, like it makes perfect sense. It should be good for their offense. So like Bo Horvat's doing just fine. You got to imagine Pettersson should be able to get back on track just like him. But man, this team in general, minus Markstrom now. And like you said, the goaltending hasn't been good. Like at this point, I don't know. In fantasy, like generally you want to have a goalie on a team that's getting more games. And it seems like Braden Holtby is the starter. He's played 4 games. Demko's played 3. And I imagine Holtby's going to get the next start on Monday. I guess we'll have to wait and find out. But both of them have been bad anyway. So it doesn't even matter. Like Holtby has an 888 save percentage at this point. Demko at 866. I wonder if people, unless it's like a super deep league where like all the goalies are rostered, it might be time to just drop your Canucks goalies and grab an extra skater because I don't know if these guys are going to help you that much. It doesn't sound like you're too optimistic that the Canucks are going to turn this around and be one of the top teams in the North Division.
No, I mean, going into this season, it was basically Toronto, Montreal, and then a morass in the middle for me. And it looks like Calgary is emerging from that, but then everyone else kind of, it looks like they stink. And maybe the Jets will be a little bit better after this trade. They've won so far, so they're in the driver's seat very early on. But in terms of the Canucks goaltending, like the defense isn't getting any better and the team depth isn't getting any better. And Holtby looked like he was cooked 2 years ago, and he's only older and in a worse system. So, I'm a believer in Demko, but not for this year. I think the situation's rough. There's a reason that I had these guys ranked. So it was one of the lowest tandems I had ranked in my preseason rankings, and I'm notoriously bad with goalies. So like, don't go over the moon for this type of stuff, but it's not a team I'd be investing in for goaltending.
Yeah, so far you're going to take a W for that prediction, and we'll see how it goes moving forward. But yeah, I think I'd be ready to. I have Holtby actually on my Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League team, and I don't think he's going to last a lot longer. Like, the Canucks have a good schedule next week. They're playing the Sens a couple times on Monday and Wednesday, and those are days where like those are the only teams playing pretty much. So for fantasy purposes, you want to hold on to your Canucks just because you're going to be able to play them, as opposed to other players on your fantasy team that are playing on Tuesday and Thursday and will be on your bench because those days are so busy. So that's why I'm also holding on to Nils Hoglander, even though he hasn't done very much aside from his goal yesterday, assisted by the red hot Bo Horvat. But yeah, after Wednesday, might be time to just get rid of all your Canucks if you're not seeing any signs of anything changing. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back to talk about another slumping player who is causing people to tear their hair out a little bit. And okay, I already recorded that, so I'm ready to go. Okay. Another guy who's had a shockingly slow start to the season, I think I'm almost more shocked about this guy than Elias Pettersson, is Rasmus Dahlin, that bottom-ranked Rasmus. Well, I guess there's some other Rasmuses. There's like Rasmus Sandin, but I mean, you can't go much lower than 0 points, which is what Rasmus Dahlin is at for the now. I guess they just won today, right? So the 2-3-1 Buffalo Sabres, they beat the Washington Capitals, the extremely shorthanded Washington Capitals, in overtime earlier this afternoon before our recording. But yeah, another pointless game for Mr. Dahlin. And like, shame on me, of course. I thought the Sabres were going to finally be good this year, because I think that every year, right? But like, I was like, Ullmark's been looking really good. Like, Dahlin is now like no longer a teenager. Like, they got Taylor Hall in there. Like, this is going to click and be so amazing. And like, Dahlin, like I said, like, he has no points, and also his ice time has been shrinking. Like, he had 24 minutes and 20 seconds in the season opener, back to like 10 minutes a couple games ago, where he was benched for a lot of the second period, or I should say most of the remainder of the game. And now today, I'm just bringing up the data now, and Dahlin played. Okay, looks like a bit of a bounce back, actually. 22 minutes and 47 seconds. So that's what I like to see. And 6 shots on goal. So, okay, already we're starting to see things turn around. But yeah, what's your take on Rasmus Dahlin? Is he the kind of guy that you have to be worried about going into his third season? Or is this like primo time to reach out and get him on the cheap from a Dahlin owner in your fantasy league? Because this is a top power play guy that has a first overall draft pick pedigree, is on a power play with Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel. Like, how could this not be working out?
So I feel like you asked a couple of different questions there. And the first one being, is Rasmus Dahlin what we think he is? And the second one being, is it time to reach out and try to acquire him? And I'll answer the second one first, because like, I really hate the buy low question, because it's not what the player's doing that sets the market on whether to buy low. It's what the people in your league and how your league operates with trades and that player's specific owner that determines whether or not that's going to happen. So with a player like Dahlin, he might just not be available, or he might only be available because he has 0 points in his first 2 weeks of playing. And so buy low isn't really buy low. It's just, you can buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with a lower level player, then maybe you might actually be able to buy low. But with a guy like Dahlin, like he has the pedigree, he has the minutes, he has all these things. And yeah, he gets benched because he gives a lackluster effort on a goal against, doesn't clear out the front of the net. And these are the type of hiccups that young players, especially young defensemen, are going to have, especially on a team that still isn't complete. Their goalies kind of stink. Like, pretty sure Tim Murray is licking his lips at those goaltenders, and their depth still isn't that great. Like, they got a first line center, a first line winger in Taylor Hall and a second line center in Eric Stahl, and their depth is still kind of shitty. So this team is going to be in the minus in the league's toughest division. And so he's going to rack up minuses, and that's going to hurt your fantasy team, and that's going to be annoying. and he's still going to get those top unit power play minutes, right? So eventually the points are going to come. There's so much talent there, right? They've got great shooters. They've got super smart player and super talented player in Taylor Hall playing the freaking bumper position. And they've got Jack Eichel distributing it all around. And Dahlin's going to get his points from the top. So I don't think it's going to go bananas the way that we want it to. This is not a Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar type situation because he's not necessarily playing on that kind of team in this kind of division this year. Like I already had this debate with Cam Robinson on our awards preview show where he thought, maybe sleeper on Dahlin. I don't think this is the year because I don't think they're in the division and I don't think they quite have the depth for him to explode the way that we want him to. But like it's coming. And just in terms of pure points, like Dahlin's points are coming. So it's like I have him in one league and I'm kind of annoyed, but I'm not sweating it. It's just like if you're in a league with bangers and mash and all that stuff, like he's not going to give you anything but points. So like he's going to be super annoying to own. But at the same time, like the points are going to be there.
Right. Yeah. So you obviously have to take into account your league categories, and good on you for calling me out. Like, don't let me just ask you if he's a buy low. I got to be specific. Like, for example, if you had the other Rasmus Anderson that we brought up, like, I think that's the kind of move that you can see potentially happening in like a 1-year redraft league. Like if someone has Rasmus Anderson, I'll bet you they could reach out to the Dahlin owner, and depending how frustrated they are, maybe you could get them to click accept. Maybe you have to wait one more pointless game. But it sounds like you're saying like you're not too concerned about the points coming, and I would make that move. I have Rasmus Anderson, like I said, in one of my leagues. So if the Dahlin owner wants to reach out to me, I'll take that deal. But like I also do appreciate that you're saying that the division is something people really need to take into account. This is a tough division this year, so it'll make it a little bit harder for Dahlin to get up to those Makar and Hughes points. So fair point. By the way, good on Linus Allmark for winning his first game of the season today after tragically losing his father earlier in the week. I saw a lot of people asking if they should be like dropping Allmark after he, like missed a game, whatever it was, because he had this like family emergency to deal with. So if anyone did drop Linus Allmark, I would grab him. I think he's the only good goalie on the team. And even if Buffalo's not going to be like amazing this year, it's hard to sometimes find a starting goalie. So I'll throw that advice out there. And then I'll just make a quick statement about Buffalo. It's not even a question, but Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall, they're very good. I'm very, I feel like they're, that this is not a hot take at all. But man, Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel are looking good together so far, at least offensively. Okay, so I actually had another defenseman I was going to bring up to you who was on a cold streak, but I think we can just wipe this one out and move on because Morgan Riley had only 1 goal and no assists going into today's game versus the Flames, but the Leafs won 3-2 this afternoon, and Morgan Riley assisted on all 3 of the goals. So I guess that buy low window, which I guess is a saying you don't like, but that window's closed anyways. Morgan Riley now almost up to a point per game. That's what happens with the small sample size of the season. All you need is 1 good game to get you right back up there in the standings. So I'm going to scratch that, scroll down, forget about everything I was going to ask about Morgan Riley. I knew the answer was going to be he's going to be fine. He's the top power play quarterback and big minute eater on this high scoring team in a high scoring division. So, but we got to say it on the podcast.
Yeah, it's like in Home Alone. Easy on the Pepsi Fuller. Like you know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I have to ask a question just to make sure it's said on the show, even if it's like obvious and not even worth discussing. One thing maybe worth discussing is the Leafs lines with Joe Thornton now out of the picture. So now they get to go to a bit of a more normal top 6, more of what we were expecting going into the year. Tavares back with Hyman and William Nylander today. And then Marner and Matthews are together playing with Jimmy Vesey, who's still holding on to that top 6 spot. That's definitely not something I had on my bingo card going into the season, but Vesey is not like capitalizing at all on this opportunity. He only has 2 goals in 7 games now. So it's one of these players who like somehow is in a good spot, but isn't going to be getting a lot of points. Very great for Zach Hyman though, who had a bit of a slow start in the bottom 6, but now he's gotten points in his last few games. And he also was great in your bangers and mash leagues. So obviously if he's still available, I'm rushing to grab him. It might be too late for that advice though.
Yeah. I mean, with Hyman, it's a matter of when, not if, right? Because like how long were they actually going to stick with the Joe Thornton plan on the top line? Like eventually it comes to nitty gritty time, and you got to win some battles in the corners. And Zach Hyman's like a dog with a bone. So yeah, I think you're more likely going to see him playing top line than Joe Thornton come say playoff time.
Right, yeah. Thornton's injured now, so theoretically, if he comes back, he could bump Hyman back down. But seems like Hyman and Tavares have some chemistry, which is something we already knew. So I was surprised that it didn't happen earlier, like just going into the year. But now he's there, and it's going well. Another
Yeah,
win for the Leafs today.
guys like Hyman have chemistry with like every best player because like I said, he's like a dog with a bone. He's gonna go get you the puck, and you know what Stars like is guys who get the puck and then give them the puck.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a situation that's going to work pretty well for them. So yeah, he might get bounced back down when Thornton's healthy again, but like it's an inevitability. It's going to happen.
Another guy who seems to always get to play with superstar players is Dominic Simone over on the Calgary Flames. Today, he was lining up with Gaudreau and Monahan on their, I guess, I don't know, top line, second line, whatever, in the top six on that good line. Like previously, we saw him playing with Crosby over in Pittsburgh, and he didn't do much there. And in this first opportunity on that line today for the Flames, he didn't do much at all. No shots, no points. If anyone streamed him in, hoping to get some good juju playing with Gaudreau and Monahan, you didn't get anything. So unlike Zach Hyman, I'm not going to be recommending Dominic Simone, even though he's getting pretty plum deployment. I assume you are with me on this one.
Yeah, let's call him a homeless man's Zach Hyman.
Yeah, okay. Even lower than a poor man. That's a shame. All right, let's go to more slumping players because I want to get all the sad stuff out of the way, and then we can end the show on like a more happier note. But a lot of people were super excited to draft the 2021st overall pick Alexis Lafreniere in their redraft leagues this year. I'm sure that people were very happy and probably are still happy that they got him in their dynasty leagues. But in 1 year leagues, I saw Alexis Lafreniere going like a lot higher than I expected him to go. I guess we've seen some really good rookies over the past couple of years, though generally they've been players who weren't this young, had a year in the minors first. And so far, the pick hasn't paid off at all. Lafreniere is still searching for his first point. He's playing tonight versus the Penguins as we're recording. Has this game started yet? The joys of recording while news is happening. The Rangers are up 1-0, and Colin Blackwell from Brett Howden and Adam Fox. So Adam Fox, the only noteworthy player there. Man, what a season for Adam Fox. Okay, we'll get to
That
him.
sounds about right.
Let's focus on Lafreniere, though. You can't complain about his deployment. He got bumped up to play with Zibanejad and Kreider lately. Is this the kind of guy where we should say, it's just a matter of time before he gets going, like we said about Dahlin and Pettersson? Or is he the kind of guy that you have to maybe consider cutting your losses with? Like, yeah, maybe I made a dumb move drafting him so high. It doesn't seem like this is going to be the year for him to have a breakout, or maybe I have to look and see what exciting options are out there in free agency. And I know you're going to say, well, it depends who's out there, but just in general, like, is this going to be a year for Lafreniere where he's going to be challenging for the Calder, or should we be concerned that this slow stretch to start is going to be a sign of things to come?
Well, it's funny because like my projections, I figured he would find his way onto one of the scoring lines where he would find a way to have his line scoring more. And thus far, I was expecting Alexis on fire, and I've gotten City in color. And I just
You've got the references on Pat today. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, I'm bringing the heat. I've been I have Lafreniere. I didn't draft him in any of my 1 year leagues, but I do have him in a dynasty league, and he has been disappointing thus far. But like obviously in a dynasty league, like you're holding on tight there. 1 year leagues, maybe we're looking at a Stamkos rookie type situation where he struggles in the first half and takes off in the second half. I don't think we're looking at a Jack Hughes, Capo Caco type rookie situation where they're just going to be overwhelmed for the whole season. I think that he's physically ready to contribute, and we'll see how long it takes for him to catch up to the NHL speed. Because remember, like a lot of the guys who have come in as rookies had gotten games elsewhere, and he didn't. So it'll be interesting to see how long it takes. And I'm not so sure that top line deployment on the New York Rangers is so hot right now, because it seems like Zibanejad is maybe totally banged up right now and not going to contribute a ton. And so I just call me when Lafreniere is playing with Panarin, and let's see what happens there.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair. So you might see him drop in some leagues. And I think it sounds like what you're saying is you don't need to maybe necessarily pounce right away again in 1 year leagues, but there could be like a second half breakout a la Stamkos. So I think I'm with you on that. If he's playing with Panarin, that's a whole other thing. Guy who's just gotten to play with Panarin is Pavel Buchnevich. It was always Buchnevich with Zibanejad and Kreider, but now Buchnevich has gone up and he's had a great start to his season, right? 4 points in his first 4 games going into today. though 3 of those points came versus the Islanders on the first Saturday of the season. But obviously, you can't complain with deployment with Panarin. But there's another guy playing with Panarin who's still stuck at 0 points, just like Lafreniere, and that's Ryan Strome. And he has less of an excuse than Lafreniere because this is not his first season. Plus, he's playing with Panarin at both even strength and on the power play. Strome's been playing 20 plus minutes a game. So, I mean, on one hand, you'd think, how can this guy not be getting points when he's playing with Panarin, who's doing just fine, by the way. Panarin has 5 points with the exact same deployment. So he's another guy that I could see getting dropped at some point in fantasy leagues. And yeah, I guess the same story for a lot of these people. And it's like 2 weeks into the season. So it's a lot of just small sample size. And there's not really much you can say. But I'd imagine that you're probably going to expect Ryan Strome to bounce back sooner than Alexis Lafreniere.
Yeah, I would say so, just based on opportunity and deployment and, the halo effect that Panarin provides. But I mean, reality, like last season was the absolute high water mark for Ryan Strome. So like, are we going to get better than that? There was a ton of guys on that team who they were just playing crazy fire wagon hockey, and I don't know if they're going to get back to that. Like, is Zibanejad going to shoot 20% like he did last year? And is Strome going to be getting secondary assists off all that stuff? Like, the offense may not be as high flying as we thought it was going to be. And, maybe shame on us for projecting that it was going to be as high flying. Cause certainly I was on board with a lot of the Rangers players this season, but doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to get there. But again, we're not even 2 weeks in. So, a lot of players are still shaking off their rust, and the biggest thing is getting those opportunities. And I don't see Strome's opportunities going away. So it's not the time to bail out, but like it depends on your league.
Yeah, I think that if you see Strome in free agency, or if I saw Strome in free agency in any of my leagues, I would be pouncing because of that opportunity. I might even take him over Buchnevich, even though Buchnevich has had the better start, just because Strome seems to be more like cemented as that center for Panarin, at least for this year. Maybe at some point Philip Hedl bumps him from that spot, but doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year.
Yeah. It's
Then
a league size thing, right? Like if you're in a 14, 16 team league, then yeah, Strome hits the waiver wire. Like he's mine. But like if you're in a 12 team league and you're dropping Buchnevich to grab Strome, then that's a situation where I think you're just going to be chasing the tail all season long. Like, ooh, this guy's hot. Ooh, this guy's hot. And you're you're just always following the points around and never actually getting them.
Yeah, definitely. I think Strome is the kind of guy I'm saying I would add, not because he's hot. Right now he's super cold, and I would grab him for the deployment. But yeah, if it's a shallow enough league, then yeah, tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson or tweet at Steve Laidlaw, and you could ask for the specific advice. Should I drop this guy for this guy? But yeah, a lot of these players having slow starts that I wouldn't expect. The one guy we have to bring up who's having a red hot start, we already mentioned him, Adam Fox. He's on the top power play. And he's been fire all season now. Like, so 4 points in 4 games going into today. I already mentioned his assist on who was it again? Colin Blackwell's opening goal of the game. Colin Blackwell, more goals than Alexis Lafreniere.
It's a made up name. You're making this up. That didn't happen.
Also, like, Fox is good for peripherals, right? He has 10 blocks going into today, 11 shots. I'm going to say something crazy right now, and then you could like pour some cold water on me. But I feel like if Fox stays in this deployment on the top power play, I could see him being like a top 5 defenseman in multi-category leagues this year. Like, it just seems like the power play is great. He's such a talented player. Plus with those blocks, oh man, I'm so mad at myself for not drafting Adam Fox in more leagues.
No, it's not crazy because Fox, the question for him was going to be deployment, right? Like we talked about with the Pionk Morrissey situation, there's a ceiling that is cast upon you when you aren't playing on the top power play unit. And we saw with DeAngelo how explosive that top power play unit can be for the New York Rangers. But DeAngelo was still there. And then DeAngelo did, I'm terrible at defense, DeAngelo things, and got himself benched. And then suddenly Fox took the opportunity and ran with it. Like Fox, without top power play unit deployment, everything else about him was as good or better than Hughes and Makar last season. It's just the points weren't there. Like he was on that level and had a Calder worthy season if not for them racking up the obscene point totals. That's the type of player that we're dealing with. And Panarin is the superstar. Like he could throw up 65, 70 points in this abbreviated season if the team can get that offensive juggernaut running. And the fact that it's like not running as smoothly as it could be and Fox is still piling up points, like that's super intriguing. I would be concerned that D'Angelo is going to come back in and muddy the waters. But like Fox, at very least, he's going to score 25 points in 56 games or however many games he plays. He's going to be at that level at minimum because we saw that's what he can do even with secondary deployment. And then it just cascades up almost exponentially with the more top unit power play exposure that he gets. So I don't think you're crazy. I think we probably see the peripherals chill out a little bit because again, maybe you don't want your defenseman shooting so much. So maybe he's on a shot barrage, and that's part of why the offense isn't working quite as well because like they're not getting better opportunities. So now their defensemen are being forced to bomb away from the point, and they don't necessarily want that. So we could see that come down. Shot blocks, in a small sample of games, like that's kind of random, but we'll see where that ends up. And then like if you've got blocks, you probably have hits. So like, is he going to provide a ton of those? Not so sure. So I don't know about top five roto, but like offense, like the potential for him to have that type of season is there. He's good enough. It's just a question: does the opportunity come together for him?
Yeah, so it's there now. Obviously, he's great while he holds it, and we'll see. And D'Angelo, man, it would be really hard for me to be holding D'Angelo in my fantasy leagues. If I'm in tight, if I can't afford to be like wasting a roster spot, I don't think there's any fantasy value for D'Angelo until he gets back on the top power play. And right now, Fox doesn't seem to be giving him any inches for an opportunity to get back there. But okay, let's go on. I've got so many guys I want to throw at you. Oh, go ahead. I think we have a bit of a delay, unfortunately, but whatever.
Yeah, do you think?
Or is there something you want to? Okay, so I'll just keep going. A bunch of players I want to throw at you. A couple more cold streak guys here before we switch to the hot streaks. Rickard Rakell, only 1 assist in 5 games going into today's game for Anaheim versus Colorado. I've got some hot streak guys coming. Like I said, I'll even like give a little bit of a spoiler here, like Kempe, Kairu, Hintz, like Bobby Ryan. Like there's been a lot of guys who've come out strong this season. Rickard Rakell has not. I've been like sort of the guy saying that I still believe in Rickard Rakell for a couple years now, even though it's been a while since he's been showing us what we thought he'd be able to be, like a 70-ish point player with big shots and lots of goals. Doesn't seem like that's possible on this Ducks team. Are you at a point where you can like advise people to drop Rakell? Even like he's still shooting, right? He has 17 shots in the 5 games so far. But maybe we should, at the very best, like assume that last year's 53-point pace is the best we can hope for once again.
Yeah, that's kind of the ceiling at this point. Like I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. And so like I've got this bottle of wine that's been sitting in my fridge for like 3 years. And I drank half of it and it's still just sitting there, just marinating. I don't know what it's doing. And that's basically Rickard Rakell. Like
Oh no.
he was awesome 3 years ago. We all wanted it. We opened that bottle of wine and we were all having a glass. Everyone wanted to taste. And it's 3 years later, and he's been sitting in the fridge festering, and it's not a good scene. So I think like I have no shares of Rakell. I won't have any shares of Rakell until someone emerges as an offensive driver on that Anaheim team, and that's probably Trevor Zegras in 2 years. And is Rakell even still going to be on the team by then?
Yeah, that would be nice for him to finally get to play with Zegras, but I don't know. That wine might keep getting more and more rancid if you're still holding on to him. I'll admit I have 1 share in Rakell, but it's because he was just dropped in one of my leagues and I picked him up for a streaming spot and he got an assist in the 1 game I've gotten him for. So I guess I'm gonna hold on a little longer. But yeah, at this point it's a very short leash, and you've heard it here first. Like he's already in like this territory where he's getting added and dropped in fantasy leagues. So I don't think you need to hold on if you're seeing good options out there. Let's go to the Penguins now, who are playing the Rangers today, and they announced a big line shuffle to go into the game. So both Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen have been bumped out of the top 6 to play together with Mark Jankowski. And then so it's been Crosby with Gensel and Rodriguez, and then Malkin with Rust and Jared McCann. So I don't know these are crazy lines that probably won't last, but either way, makes sense that Zucker gets demoted, right? Because he only has 1 assist in 5 games. Now that he's playing on line 3, I feel like until something changes, I think you could drop him for sure. Like I'm not interested in Jason Zucker not playing with Crosby or Malkin.
Yeah, so Zucker he kind of is what he is. Like he's gonna have some hot streaks and some cold streaks. I've watched a few Penguins games, or at least a few Penguins periods, and like the chances are close, but they just haven't been happening for him. So I don't know, bump him down the line. But like for Kapanen, pretty sure he started out his first couple of games on the fourth line and he scored. So this is actually a promotion for him. Third line deployment, promotion for Kapanen. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that Kapanen, I don't think the right spot for him is in the top six. I don't think he's that type of player. And I think he's the type of guy you want beating up on lower lines where he can just kind of do his speed thing and maybe gets you some goals. And hopefully that helps out the Penguins in like a third line, fourth line role. Cause I don't think putting him in the top six is going to be something that either of their centermen are thoroughly going to enjoy.
Yeah, Leafs fans are very well familiar with third line Kasperi Kapanen, so this is not a shock for them to see him there on the Penguins. Just add, Zucker and Kapanen and whoever else to the long list of people that people have gotten excited about because they're going to the Penguins, and this allure of like playing with Crosby and Malkin just makes you want to add every single player. Like Galchenyuk's been there, David Perron was there. David Perron actually is good now, but he had a stretch of being bad, and going through Pittsburgh didn't help that. So yeah, we'll see. Like obviously, if one of them gets back there. Or you're saying Captain. I think Captain was there for a game. But yeah, like if one of them gets back there, you could stream him in and then hope for the best. But I'm not holding out too much hope at this point. Here's a guy. Okay, I definitely am not going to say to drop this guy. And by the way, I got just a couple more cold streak guys to go. We're clearing out the fridge, right? So that we can make room for all the hot streak guys that we're going to potentially want to be adding to our, I don't know, chef's plate plan for the week. But that wasn't a paid advertisement.
Yeah, Elon, after this, Elon, after this, do you want to come help me clear out my fridge?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Unless I'm not interested in that wine that you're talking about. That's 3 years old. But we could take a look at maybe the cheese drawer or something. But yeah, I want to bring up Anthony Mantha, who played on the third line today for Detroit. Only 12 minutes and 50 seconds of ice time. A couple bad plays led to Chicago goals. Yeah, I'm getting a little worried about Mantha here because he's supposed to be locked alongside Dylan Larkin as like the only offensive line on the team. Now that they're separated, I mean, I don't know. What do you do? Like, he's only got 3 points in 6 games now. Detroit seems like a mess. This guy named Matthias Brome was playing on the top line with Larkin and Bertuzzi today. I've got Mantha in a couple of my leagues, and I'll admit I'm worried. So, Steve, please ease my concerns. Tell me that I shouldn't be worried about Anthony Mantha.
Yeah, I'm heavy on the Mantha and Larkin shares in my 1 year leagues. So I get where you're at. I think you just kind of ride this one out for a little while longer because we know what those guys can do together, and like you can understand the logic of them splitting those guys up. They they only have so much talent, right? So you want to kickstart some of the other lines so that you've got more lines that you could throw at people. And it's generally not a great solution when you're just loading up one line and hoping that it works out for you. But they might have to do that just to generate offense. So I know they tried some other stuff to generate offense and it didn't necessarily work. So I think Mantha finds his way back to that top line sooner rather than later. But like, depends on your league too, right? Like if you own those guys, you're going to be drowning plus minus like every single week. So you're basically throwing that category away. And anyone who follows my rankings know I don't even rank plus minus. I don't put a projection for it. I don't include it. It's not involved. I will punt that category and dominate you everywhere else. And that's basically what Mantha is. He's going to drown you in plus minus, and like the opportunity has been there. I've watched more Detroit than I thought I would to start the season, and like he has had a ton of chances. So I'm not really that concerned. The only thing that would concern me is like if he gets hurt and then suddenly he comes back and he's fighting it all year. We've been down that road with Mantha before, sure. Right? Like we're waiting for the year that he stays healthy and doesn't maroon us.
Well, so far, like he's healthy. Now we just need him to get going offensively. Sounds like you're saying you've seen him have some chances. So I'm glad to see that. If you're playing in a plus minus league, come on, change the rules of your league. That's silly. Like, why should these players arbitrarily be devalued just because of the team they're on? By the way, on Detroit though, Bobby Ryan's still cooking. So to keep the food analogies going, I don't know, stupid. Bobby Ryan's still cooking. Power play assist on Sunday brought him to 5 points in 5 games now. At first, I was thinking like, oh, come on, this is just for fun. It's definitely not going to last. At this point, I feel like I'm ready to add Bobby Ryan. Right? He's on the top power play. Now, that power play assist came on a goal with like Larkin involved, all the names you want to hear, Hronik. Like, I would definitely be dropping like a Jason Zucker for Bobby Ryan. I might even drop Rickard Raquel for Bobby Ryan. Like, I'm not saying it's a season-long thing, but I think you got to stream Ryan in while he's hot and ride it out, because I think it could keep going for a little bit longer. But maybe I'm just excited about the cool story and remembering back in like 2009 when he was a really good player in the NHL.
No, this is been one of the best stories of the season, and he legitimately looks good. He legitimately looks like a version of his older self, right? He's forechecking well, he's playing the power game, and he's parked at the net front on a power play that shouldn't be terrible, right? Larkin's going to be distributing to Bertuzzi and to Mantha, and there should be enough goals there for him to have some relevance. Depends on the depth of your league, but certainly you're talking about a Raquel. Well, there's more offensive potential in Detroit than there is in Anaheim. So if they're playing the same type of deployment in minutes, I would go with Ryan. And I did not see that coming whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a strange year, but again, like especially in a short season, you got to adapt quickly. And yeah, jump on Bobby Ryan for now, ride him while he's hot. Okay, one more cold streak guy, and then we'll turn the tide around. Though we've brought in some hot streaks along the way to keep it fun, but obviously not at the level of like a Pettersson, Dahlin, or Morgan Riley. But like at this point, Nikita Gusev, I was kind of into him going into the year. He seems like droppable all over at this point, like no points in 4 games going into his game today versus the Islanders. So watch him put up a hat trick and make me look dumb. But he's had like a lot of shots, which is a reason why I'm still kind of interested. He had like a couple 4-shot games, even a 5-shot game. So he could be a hold, but it's just hard to imagine him having much of an impact, at least until Hischier is back. Like it seems like at this point, the Devils have one line that's producing, like Hughes, Palmieri, and Sharangovich. And like, yeah, aside from like Miles Wood has had a couple of good games, but I think like playing with Zajac and Boqvist doesn't excite me. So yeah, I think maybe wait for Hischier to come back and then grab Gusev if he's still available. But for now, I think he's probably a drop. I'm curious to know if you concur.
Yeah, I struggle to figure out what exactly to do with Gusev because I was high on him coming into this season as well. You look at what they, after the coaching change last season, they gave him a ton of opportunities to basically run things as their power play quarterback from the half wall. And he had an explosive second half to the season. And I thought we'd be back into that situation this season as well. And it seems like because he's not producing, he's slowly falling down the lineup and getting less and less deployment. I haven't been too keyed in on New Jersey. I've seen the Jack Hughes highlights and I've watched a little bit of that. But it seems to me like Gusev, he's falling further and further down the depth chart. And with Jack Hughes being what he is, they might just hand the car keys to him and say, no, you're the playmaking guy for us on the power play now. And that might just mean, hey, Gusev, you're kind of caught in the wind here.
Yeah, your goose is cooked. But actually, Gusev does have an assist today. For what it's worth, I just think now the New Jersey's up 2-0 at the end of the first, and Pavel Zacha scored a goal that Gusev assisted on. The other assist went to Ty Smith. Also, Jack Hughes scored a power play goal assisted by Palmieri, and Ty Smith, who appears to be on the top power play now. I think this is new, was Subban for the first few games. Ty Smith I was already planning on bringing up because he had a point in every game of the season going into today. Throw another couple assists on top of that. It's Ty Smith's season, right? Like everyone should pause the podcast and go add Ty Smith, like wherever they see him available.
Yeah, this is crazy. I think before tonight, Ty Smith had already surpassed my fantasy projection for him for this year.
Oh, no.
I mean, who knew that Will Butcher was just going to be just excised from the lineup and Ty Smith has completely replaced him. And a certain amount of his, like he's been good from what I've seen. He's been legit. So the question is about that deployment, right? Because we know what that ceiling is on you if you're not getting those top power play minutes. But like Subban's not immovable on the point. He might not be able to move, but it's not like the coach has to roll him out there on the top power play unit. We all kind of were hoping, oh yeah, this is a guy who could put up stats across the board if he gets that top power play unit role and he's healthy again, maybe he'll roll. But It looks like Ty Smith is running away with this thing. And I wouldn't want to get too carried away because there are a ton of options that could displace him. But like at worst, he's in that 30 to 35 point range in a 82 game season. So what is that in a regular season? 20 to 25 points for this 56 game season. Like his projection is exploding, and it only goes up higher if he can hang on to that top power play unit role. So exciting times for Ty Smith.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to show me your team if you think that you don't have room for Ty Smith in your lineup. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying, that who knows if he can like keep this up, and like maybe he doesn't hold the top power play, but if he's there and he's in free agency in your league, like why not get him in? I guess it becomes difficult if it's like a shallower league and you're deciding if it's time to drop like a D'Angelo or a Neil Pionk, who have been bumped from the top power play, for a Ty Smith. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm ready to go more fast and loose this season. And so I might even make one of those swaps. So I don't know. Maybe it's crazy, but I'm pretty excited with what I've been seeing so far. And plus, this team is going to get Nico Hischier back and Jesper Bratt. Like, there are some offensive weapons coming, which could help the team, like, you know, be able to score even more goals. And you'd think that someone like Smith is going to benefit from that. Hopefully, they'll get Mackenzie Blackwood. Hopefully, they'll get Mackenzie Blackwood back soon. He's currently undergoing COVID protocol. This is a team that was supposed to have one of like the best tandems going into the season, like Blackwood and Crawford. I was like, wow, look at the Devils. They're going to be awesome. Instead, I believe today they've got Scott Wedgwood playing and Eric Comrie is backing up. So a bit of a downgrade, though. Hey, like I said, so far Wedgwood has stopped 11 of 11, but maybe I'll stop making mid-game references that are already out of date for everyone who's listening to it. The Devils did sign Aaron Dell after Toronto waived him. So it'll be interesting to see, like, once everyone's healthy, I'd imagine it will be like Blackwood and Aaron Dell as the two goalies. But in the meantime, I don't know, I kind of feel like you want to load up on DFS teams versus the Devils if it's going to be Scott Wedgwood or Eric Comrie in net.
I mean, that seems like a valid strategy. That's a underwhelming goalie room considering what they had before.
Yeah, what a bummer. And I mean, good for Corey Crawford for like focusing on his health, and Blackwood, like, yeah, I think this could be a great season for Blackwood. I like this Devils team. Like, I think they're an underrated looking team, and like they're doing good again today. But yeah, once he's back, like if anyone is like gonna drop Blackwood, if you're in one of these leagues where people just go crazy and drop a goalie because they're under COVID protocol, yeah, scoop them up. I think it's gonna be great, but bummer for them right now. All right, let's get into some hot streaks now. Let's get excited. Though I've already got excited about Ty Smith, let's do a couple more defensemen. How about on the Islanders, the team the Devils are playing today? A guy who's really jumped on my radar is Noah Dobson. In the first game that the Islanders played versus New Jersey on Thursday, Dobson put up a cool 2 assists along with 2 shots, and get this, 7 blocks. So this is not our typical like low calorie top power play guy in your categories league on the Islanders, like Devon Taves was last year. I remember Taves was on the top power play. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Then you look like he's not giving you anything aside from, power play assist every now and then. Looks like Dobson is going to help you in peripherals even when he doesn't get points. Plus, he's getting points. He's a second D-man on that top power play unit with Pulak, Eberle, Lee, and Barzal. And now that I see that he could put up the periffs, I feel like it's time for his percentage rostered on Yahoo to surge from the 4% that it's at now. So I'm going to throw a rankings question at you, Ryan. Man, I suck. Rankings question at you. Brian always hates this, but I'm going to throw it at you, Steve. Hopefully you won't hate me. Let's say if you have Rasmus Anderson, Ty Smith, and Noah Dobson all out there, who's your pick?
Rasmus Anderson, and like not particularly close.
Oh, okay.
And then probably I would lean towards Ty Smith just to see what can happen with this New Jersey situation. And then I just look at the Islanders situation, and it's just there's never going to be that one defenseman that blows you away. Like you said, he's on the top power play unit, but like they don't have a top power play unit. They play their power play units evenly.
Fair.
And so again, that's just putting a ceiling on things, and their power plays aren't even like good, and their team isn't explosive offensively. So to me, like he's very much trapped in that ceiling. He's already doing more with the time that he's gotten than I maybe would have expected. Like certainly high pedigree player, you figure he turns into this at some point. Is it maybe just a hot streak? We'll see, but the opportunity is there for him to be relevant in deeper leagues the biggest thing that like I would be excited about in those deep leagues is the fact that in their second game of the year, when they just got blown out of the water by the Rangers, he made some boneheaded rookie mistakes and he wasn't immediately benched the way we saw D'Angelo benched. And so just the fact that like Trotz isn't falling back on that stuff in the way that they're breaking Dobson into the league has got to be exciting, because nothing could deflate you more than if Dobson's in and out of the lineup because he's a rookie. And if that's not happening, then at the very least, deep leagues, that's a guy that you would be interested in.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good sign. Yeah, you see on Chicago, like Boqvist loses a lot of ice time whenever he has some bad play. And Chicago's not even a contending team. Why not let Boqvist just play? It would make more sense to bench someone like Dobson because the Islanders are trying to like make a run at it. So yeah, that is a good sign. But I think I'll agree with your rankings for now. But definitely he's a guy that people should have on their radars. Let's go from this defenseman to a defenseman who's like, we're talking about a rookie. How about someone who has just played a couple games so far in their whole career? And that's Bowen Byram over on the Colorado Avalanche. He played his first game versus LA on Thursday, didn't do much. But then he had a really sweet looking assist on Mikko Rantanen's goal on Friday for his first career point. He may only be getting like this 6-game look before he gets sent down to the minors, but I think he's someone that you have to consider rostering while he's around, right? Like Colorado's playing Anaheim today. The game's just started. So unfortunately I can't report on that, but I'd be like, if you're listening to this podcast tomorrow on Monday, take a break, go to Frozen Tools, check what the line combos were, check out what Byram's ice time was, and obviously check if he produced, because I think he could be a fun short-term ad. Like from the minutes that I saw him play in that last game on Friday, like he looked like he had a lot of talent. I saw him with the puck a lot, like he was skating around. I don't know, like I'm not a big hockey an analyzer like you. You actually know how to watch games and tell if players are good or not. I'm more of a spreadsheet guy, but I liked what I saw from Byram. Clearly he's going to be a star in the league in the future. And next week, Colorado plays 4 times, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you can fit him in and he's available in your 1-year league, he's someone I would be interested in trying out.
Well, you said it right. It's a 6-game tryout, and then he's down to the minors, probably. So, like, how many people does he have to pass before he gets good deployment? There's Devon Taves, and there's Sam Girard, and there's Cale Makar, and like the list just goes on and on. So, like, I don't know. I wouldn't really be wasting my time on a short-term play like that. But
That's fair.
I mean, he's obviously super talented, and it's a question of when, not if, he becomes a relevant player, and it's probably not this year. But I mean, he's talented, and I think you've given me far too credit for my puck watching abilities. But I would just say that there are layers to this thing. And
yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I think it's like maybe my advice is just he might be a fun guy to stream in for a week if you're playing in a league where you tend to like add and drop players willy-nilly all throughout. Maybe he's a guy that can jump into a spot if you have an open D spot on one of the games next week. But I'm with you. Like he's probably not going to get a lot of ice time, but I could see him potentially getting a shot on like the second power play and maybe something could happen. I really like that assist on Rantanen's goal because I'm basing this all on that. So, okay, you've convinced me. Forget about Bowen Byram. By the way, the Colorado...
No, I want to touch on something.
Okay.
So you said if you're in, like you talked about fun, right? And we talked about how fun Bobby Ryan is. If you're not having fun this year, then like my God. So whatever it is that you need to do to have fun, like if you need to pick up Bowen Byram and carry him on your roster all year and be like, I love Bowen Byram, and that makes you happy about your fantasy team this year, then like please fucking do it. Like, because I'm losing my mind and I cannot not lose my mind about my fantasy team. And so in a season like this where everything is like beyond our control, like completely beyond our control, more so than it already is, like just being able to cling on to things that are fun for you, you have to do it. So if this is casual, then have fun. Like please have fun with this stuff, and above all else, because you don't want to do what I do and just like sweat this stuff so hard.
No, that's really good advice. Like, I'm really trying to play this like sort of more zen way this year. Like, for example, I've got Evgeny Kuznetsov on one of my teams, and then obviously this news came out that they broke protocol and he's going to miss 4 games. And I tried really hard to not stress out. I was just like, well, that's a shame. And I'm like, what should I do? Just try to not get too angry, because you're right. Like people are going to be, who are really good at playing fantasy hockey, some of them are just gonna have bad luck this year. Like all these, delayed games, rescheduled games, all these players randomly going on the COVID list. So yeah, we're lucky to even be able to play. This probably shouldn't even be happening, but it's here for us to play, and I'm with you. But with that, also I'm with you to not rush to grab Bowen Byram in your 1-year leagues. I was going to bring up Colorado's lines quickly because it looks like Nazem Kadri has been bumped to the third line to play with Valerie Nichushkin and Matt Calvert, and Burakovsky is back in the lineup today, but it's a JT Compher centering his line with Brandon Saad. So I don't know, nothing really to take away from that, but just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying to drop Nazem Kadri yet. Well, that might not even last. And Kadri's on the top power play anyway, so he's going to get his points.
Yeah, that's the thing to watch is where is he on the power play? Because as soon as he vanishes from there, then you could just like fire him to the waiver wire.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I hope that won't happen. I guess it could happen because Burakovsky's back, and Burakovsky has gotten on that top power play before, sometimes bumping Landeskog. But yeah, Kadri could be someone else who gets bumped. So watch those Colorado lines. We'll see how they do today against Anaheim. Ducks are up 1-0 right now. Okay, enough defense anyways. We've talked about a lot of these young defensemen. Let's go to some forwards. Last week on the show, we brought up how Jeff Carter had a hot start to the season for the Kings. He's slowed down a bit since, only 1 assist in his last 3 games. And that's what we predicted would happen. So I'm going to count that as a Keeping Karlsson good prediction there. But this week I have a new Los Angeles King player to throw at you, and I think he's someone I'm going to be more into than I was about Jeff Carter last week, and that is Adrian Kempe, who has been promoted to the top line with Kopitar. He bumped Dustin Brown, so it's been Kempe with Kopitar and Iafallo. Kempe was already on the top power play also, and he's been scoring some goals. He's got a goal in each of his last 3 games. Unfortunately for LA, like they only play 2 games next week on Tuesday and Thursday, which are both busy days. So if this is like a stream, maybe you just wait and see if you can get Kempe like for the following week. But this seems like a guy who could potentially be a season-long hold. Like someone, okay, like if it's not him, then it's like no Kings aside from Kopitar for forwards at least should be rostered. So I think at this point, at the very least, I'm saying that I think Adrian Kempe is the forward that I'd want the most on the Kings outside of Kopitar.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Like the guy, he can really shoot the puck. We'll see. There could be a little yin and yang going on with him and Iafallo, depending on who is hot that week, who gets that opportunity. But I like what I've seen from him thus far. He's big, he's fast, he seems to be playing in straight lines, predictable hockey, and he can shoot the crap out of the puck. So like there's a lot to like there. But at the same time, is the West Division going to be the lowest scoring division? Like, what happens when they've got to play Vegas and then Arizona and then St. Louis for like 2 weeks straight? Like, are you hanging on to Kempe? Is Kempe going to hang on to a top line role if that line's not clicking? Like, I have questions, and I mean, it should be mentioned that he was looking good against the Blues when I was watching them last night. So it's not like it's a death sentence playing in a lower scoring division, but like I would rather have a guy like Toffoli playing on the third line in Montreal than a guy playing on the top line in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually true, even not this season, and maybe more so this season with those divisions. Yeah, so if Toffoli's available, you're probably going to want to grab him, especially with the run he's been on. But if you're in a deeper league and Kempe is out there, and like just have him on your watch list at least, I like the opportunity he's had. So LA's playing St. Louis again today, so we'll see how he does. Everyone listening, pause now, check and see how Kempe did, and I don't know, tweet at us and be like, you were right or you were wrong about Kempe. That might be kind of a weird tweet to receive, but why not? Okay, let's go to St. Louis now. They also have a new guy who I'm kind of interested in, who's seen a promotion to the top 6 recently, and that is Jordan Kyrou, who's been skating on a line with Schenn and Schwartz. He's got 4 points in 5 games to start the season. A bit concerning that he had no points and only saw 12 minutes and 45 seconds of ice time yesterday versus the Kings, but he put up 5 shots in that time. So that kind of makes up for it and keeps me still interested in Jordan Kyrou, who's 22 years old, someone I've heard prospect fanatics talking about for a little bit recently. Like he isn't someone who wasn't like, he wasn't someone that was on my radar at all, like before, like this past offseason when I started seeing him in lists of like top prospects going into the year and Kyrou's name was popping up. And yeah, so do you think that this deployment playing with Schenn and Schwartz can hold and maybe Kyrou can become someone that starts maintaining some fantasy relevance, at least in deeper leagues? Like I know there's another guy on the team, Robert Thomas, who a lot of people were excited about going into the season. If they were both in free agency, who would you go for first between Kyrou and Robert Thomas?
I think it would depend on the league. And like you talked about the shot volume with Kyrou, and that's kind of what he is. He's a fast train, he's a water bug, and he's gonna shoot the puck. And it's gonna depend on how much opportunity he gets, because a lot of years it's been like in and out of the lineup, fourth line deployment. We'll take what we can get out of you, Kyrou, but you're not ready to be a regular. I think he's got to be close to being a regular if he's not already there now. Robert Thomas is just a disgusting playmaker, but like if you're in a league with all the categories, like he's going to put up assists and that's about it. And the problem with both of these guys is neither one of them is going to get onto the top power play unit. So like we talked about it with defensemen, and there's a similar thing with forwards, right? Like you look at Verana, who was the best 5-on-5 producer for the Washington Capitals last year, and there was no way he was getting beyond 60 points because he couldn't get on the top power play unit. But in the last 2 games that they've had COVID outages, he's been scoring like crazy on the power play. So like the talent is there. It's about whether you get that opportunity. Like you've been out shopping during the pandemic, right?
Oh yeah, and by out shopping you mean browsing
For
Amazon
groceries
in my underwear. Oh, okay, yes. Actually, I'm doing that mostly online too. But let's keep going with this.
Okay, so like you're trying to do it as little as possible. You're trying to load up in one trip, and so you come back from that trip and you've got all these toys, right? You've got everything that you've thought out to make this fantastic meal. That's the
I thought
top
that I
power
was
play
grocery
unit.
shopping. Why am I buying toys?
You get like, sorry, you've got all these ingredients.
Yes.
I've misassigned my labels for things in.
I thought maybe you were
in
saying
this
that I bought a
analogy.
bunch of Kinder Surprises and then I got a lot of toys out of them.
That as well. So you've got all these ingredients and you've got all this opportunity. You've made all these plans. That's your top power play unit. Okay, so you went out and you did your shopping on Sunday. And you made these fantastic meals to start the week. Well, now it's Friday and you're tired from the week and you got nothing in the fridge. And before you know it, you are wrapping pickles in Kraft singles and you've eaten a box of crackers and that's dinner and that's second power play unit opportunities, and I hate it. But that's kind of what you're dealing with for guys like Thomas and Kyrou. So like there's going to be some enjoyment there, but like the ceiling is so much lower.
That's fair. You took us on quite a ride there. I think my main takeaway is that you should ask for a raise. I thought firefighters got paid pretty well. If you're stuck eating like pickles wrapped in whatever you were saying, as opposed to just ordering some Uber Eats, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
try that out.
we don't have that in Dryden, Ontario, but that's another story. And I'm not eating Kraft singles. I don't like that stuff, but it's an analogy that many can relate
to. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so definitely Kyrou, like
listeners out there, you know who you are with your cheese wrapped pickles.
Sounds so gross. But okay, yeah. These guys are more for deeper leagues for sure. Okay, I want to
just one last point. One last point on Mr. Robert Thomas. He is such a good playmaker. I'm telling you, he is going to have like Backstrom, Blake Wheeler type assist levels at some point in his career. It's just a question of when.
Okay, well, hey, good news for Mike Hoffman, who you'd be a little bit down on, like, oh, he's on the third line. That's not great, but at least he's playing with this amazing playmaker, Robert Thomas. So it hasn't been going too badly so far. Could be better. But okay, now this will be the segment of the show where I'm going to salivate over the Montreal Canadiens. I don't really have a question for you. I'm just going to tell you about a bunch of Montreal Canadiens that are doing really well. And then you could respond by saying, yeah, they're doing really well, I guess. And then maybe have an awesome insight. But man, this team, they're still yet to lose in regulation after that 5-2 win over the Canucks on Saturday. They're 4-0-2. They've got 9 players now that have 4 or more points in these 6 games. And that includes Tyler Toffoli, who we brought up. It's on a 4-game point streak now, including that Hattie, and then a 2-goal, 1-assist game versus the Canucks. He'll definitely be sad to be leaving Vancouver. He had 8 points, or no, he has 8 points overall, but like a lot of them came against the Canucks. So we'll see how he can do in his next destination. I've got Jeff Petrie, 2 goals and 5 assists. Thomas Tatar's got 3 goals and 3 assists. Suzuki, 2 goals and 4 assists. Where I'm still talking about point per game guys. Jonathan Drouin had a nice 1-goal, 1-assist game on Saturday to bring him to a goal and 5 assists in 6 games. Unfortunately, Yoel Armia was having an amazing night with Toffoli on Thursday. He had 2 goals and 2 assists just in that game before Tyler Myers hit him high. Now he's out for the concussion, which sucks. Then Corey Perry took his place on that line with Toffoli and Kotkaniemi. Corey Perry scored a goal on Saturday and took 4 shots. So even he's able to do well on this team. Then we've got Weber, Josh Anderson, Gallagher. They all have 4 points. Like, Steve, are the Habs, like, you brought them up as saying they're one of the top 2 teams in the North. Like, how good is this team? Like, I think at this point, they're the front runner for being the team with the most, they're going to have the most rostered players of any NHL team in terms of fantasy. Okay, let me say this correctly. In the couple, let's say I'm going to find what's a team that has the most rostered players on average. Right now, it's looking like it might be the Habs with like 3 lines of all fantasy relevant guys, plus like 3 defensemen. You know, Weber, Petrie, and Romanov are probably all worth having on your team. Like, I don't know. This team is great. Like, do we need to be responsible now and suggest that people like try to trade Tyler Toffoli or Jeff Petrie because they're overperforming and now might be a good time to get a good haul for them? Or do we just say, yeah, the Habs are going to be freaking awesome this year?
Okay, so I feel like, again, you've asked several questions.
Yeah, that's
so
my thing.
The first thing, the inverse of should you buy low is should you sell high? And the answer is always you can try, but it's just a matter of whether people are buying or not. So should you sell high on Tyler Toffoli? Well, yeah, if you're getting like a legit first line player, like if someone wants to trade you Kyle Connor for Tyler Toffoli,
Well, yeah, that
because
might be hard.
then
You could
yeah,
reach out to the Pedersen owner. He's been struggling.
right. Like if you're getting that sort of thing, but otherwise, like this Canadians team, they're legit. They were one of my, their point total over under for this season was one of my biggest bets coming into the season because they have a depth that frankly no other team in the Canadian division can touch. Like there's other teams with more top talent, but they're basically just going to sick the Dano line on every other team's top line, and then like it's not like Suzuki can't hang with a good second line. And then they're just throwing Kotkaniemi and Toffoli out there to feast on everyone's terrible bottom six. And we saw what that looks like when they played Vancouver. We saw what that looks like when they played Edmonton. We're going to see what it looks like when they play every single team in this division because no one's got a good bottom six except for them. And the result of it is going to be a lot of players who can put up a fair amount of points. And I think things are going to cool down in terms of the offense. It's not necessarily going to be every game's like 7-5, but the Canadian division is going to be higher scoring. And that is going to mean that players who playing on the third line, their ceiling would be maybe limited to 50, 60 point pace. Well, they can reach the upper limits of that ceiling as a result of getting to play against like Kyle Turris 8 times a season.
Right. Okay, this is yeah, it's looking good for the Habs. Like you say, everything, like they're in this great division. They're so deep. They're gonna be a good team. It's good. People who drafted Carey Price, well, he might have some goals against, but the wins are gonna come this year, so it's fun.
Yeah.
I just recently became a Habs fan. I had a friend who's like a big Habs fan. Though one of the big reasons is there's a fun bar in Toronto where all the Habs fans go to watch Montreal Canadiens games, Kilgore's, and it's so fun to go there, like high five people when they score. We can't do that now, so it's less fun to be a Habs fan now than it's supposed to be. Hopefully, we can get back there at some point before the season's over. I guess that's probably not going to happen. But okay, so that's them. They're exciting. Another team that's
since you can't do that, since you can't do that, you can own one of them on your fantasy team. There's enough of them to go around for everyone in a 12-team league, so everyone can have a little taste, and you all high five each other as they rampage over everyone. And I just one last thing on the Habs. It's not all roses because they're one of those teams. They split up their power play time pretty evenly, but the quote unquote number one unit, they're still trying to set up Shea Weber for one timers in the OV spot, and that's not a good recipe. So the power play is still going to kind of stink, but everything else is coming up Habs.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they could try to change that if it's not working. Like, hopefully they can be flexible.
No, they're going to keep beating their heads against the wall.
So yeah, another team that's also had a really hot start to the year, though this team has only played one game so far as of this recording, and that's the Dallas Stars, who came shot out of a cannon in their first game versus Nashville on Friday. They absolutely spanked them for a 7-0 win. They're playing Nashville once again tonight, so hopefully the Preds will come out with a stronger performance. So far, it's 0-0. Halfway through the first period, so already going better for Nashville. But man, like I'm going to again throw a list of players at you who had big games. I guess you'd expect that with the 7-0 win. Like Radulov and Pavelski had huge games. A lot of these points came on the power play. I think it was like 4 power play goals or 5 power play goals for Dallas in this game. Hintz and Gurionov are looking really good together on the top line. They were playing with Jamie Benn, who unfortunately got injured. So we will have to see if there's maybe another guy that you can slot in there, maybe consider as like a deep add in a fantasy league. I think it was Jason Robertson who no, sorry, it was Jason Dickinson. They have 2 Jasons on this team. I think it was Jason Dickinson who slotted in instead of Ben. We'll see. That I can see that changing a lot over the week. But yeah, if like Hintz or Gurionov, like, you know, the Dallas is one of these teams that they didn't play for so long. But I think there were some fantasy managers who decided I'm just going to drop my Dallas guy, especially like a Rupe Hintz, let's say, who wasn't like gangbusters last year. They're like, I could just drop this guy and maybe I'll grab him back later or whatever. And now all of a sudden it's like, you have to grab Rupe Hintz, I think, because he's on this top line. He's on like what looks like the top power play with, by the way, Klingberg and not Heiskanen. So that's something that's kind of interesting. So yeah, just another team with a lot of big names that are exciting, but also let's not analyze them too much, I guess, because it's been literally one game. We'll have a second game of data today.
Yeah, and the Stars were one of my most confusing teams coming into this season because there is so much flux. Is Jamie Benn he channeled it in the bubble playoffs, but like, can he be that guy in the regular season? I don't know. I think there's a level that he can get to that is only reserved for the playoffs now, just because he's seen all those miles. And Tyler Seguin's out for the year, so, well, maybe not out for the year, but he's out for a lot of it. So what are they like? Who's going to be the driver for them? And they've got this situation where they're another one of those teams that they split up their power play unit time almost. So like, is it Heiskanen? Is it Klingberg? I don't know. I think both of their ceilings are kind of a little bit limited by the way that they use them, and they're both phenomenal. So like, I would want a taste of both of them, but ultimately you're not going to get that ridiculous payoff because they're both kind of eating into each other's upside. And then like Hintz and Gurionov, those guys were freaking like the best thing going for the Dallas Stars in the regular season last year in terms of per minute scoring. But most of that was just them playing rope-a-dope counterattack. We can score if we're playing in transition, but as soon as they had to score in a bogged down situation where they weren't coming in with speed, it wasn't happening. And that's why even in the playoffs, they were only limited to 12, 13 minutes a night. And so now they're being asked to be top line type players. Can they carry over that production? Can they remain 2 points per hour at 5-on-5 type players at 16 minutes a night? And can they do it a little bit more on the power play? These are the questions we're asking. I think they can, but will they do it? And then with some of their older guys, like, everything scoring about the Dallas Stars was terrible last year because they were playing that Jim Montgomery system. And then they get to the bubble and Rick Bowness finally gets to allow the defenseman to jump into the play. Like, Jamie Alexiak scored a breakaway goal. That's how aggressive they were being offensively. And so they're in this situation where they're going to be a lot more offensive than what we saw last year. And now it's just a question of like, to what level does that go? And do all these injuries that keep mounting for them erode their depth to the point where they're maybe not the defensive outfit that we thought that they were? I'm still confused about them.
It's tricky, right? Because last year, like I said, they were like defensive all year. All of a sudden, they were even defensive like at the start of the playoffs, and all of a sudden they play Colorado, and all of a sudden like the floodgates open, and it's almost as if they were able to adapt. Like, depending on who they play, they'll like play the style that they need to play to beat that team, and all of a sudden they were scoring a ton of goals. And so, yeah, like obviously these injuries, it's almost like potentially a good thing for the players that are healthy. Because like I say, if they can't play that defensive system, that just means more offense potentially for Hintz and Gurionov to try to keep up in more high scoring games. So they do have Hudobin in nets, who looked really good in his first game. He's playing again today. So yeah, this is like a strong team. They made it to the Cup Finals for a reason. And I will comment though on the power play thing. At least in game one, John Klingberg had almost 8 minutes of power play time, and Heiskanen was down at closer to 3 minutes. So Heiskanen was the one drafted ahead of Klingberg in most leagues, And I think that might have been a mistake, at least for this year, at least at the start. Like Klingberg's getting the deployment. He had a great 3-assist game. I think a lot of people were ready to kind of write off Klingberg and say, okay, he's passed the torch over to Heiskanen. Like, if this is not shade against Heiskanen, I would be happy to have him on my fantasy team. But I think John Klingberg still could have another big year in him. And he's only a couple years removed from being like a 60-point guy. And if the Dallas team could start scoring more goals again, like you're saying might be possible, all of a sudden Klingberg might have a breakout that people weren't expecting.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was in game one a situation of riding the hot hand.
Yeah.
Because like Radulov and Pavelski, it was just like, oh, we're scoring again. Oh, we're scoring again. So like every power play, they just kept racking it up. So why would you go away from that, right? And so over 56 games, there's going to be situations where that unit isn't clicking, and so now the second unit's coming over the boards, and now the minutes are evening up a little bit more. I don't know. That's how they deployed it in the bubble, but I would agree with you that like I definitely lean Klingberg fantasy wise versus Heiskanen. Like they're different guys, right? Like Klingberg, he really likes to shoot from the point, but he's really good at walking the point and stuff like that. I think he's a little bit more dynamic offensively in terms of being on the power play, whereas Heiskanen's the guy who he's going to shut you down. He's more the Victor Hedman type, right? Like when he wants to get his offense, it's going to be him jumping up into the rush and using that phenomenal skating ability. Whereas with Klingberg, it's more of that half court type offense, if you can picture what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally get that. Like Heiskanen's the one that's going to win the Conn Smythe if the team wins the cup, but he might not be the leading scorer on the team. By the way, another mid-game update. Dallas has scored a power play goal with Klingberg on the ice. He didn't get a point, but he was the defenseman on the power play. Gurianov from Pavelski and Hintz. So all the more if Hintz and Gurianov or Pavelski, right? If any of these guys are available, you're jumping on them right now and seeing how far they can take this thing. Maybe also the older players like Pavelski and Radulov who are healthy. I guess I would have also thrown Ben in there. Like maybe this long rest, it's good. Like the older the player is, it seems like the more rest they need, and maybe they've been able to, all these bumps and bruises they've accumulated over their careers, like more time to kind of heal that up and be fresh for the season. Another like deep cut I'll say is Yoel Kiviranta was on the line with Pavelski and Radulov and actually had a goal and an assist in that game. I think a lot of people thought Kiviranta was just like a fun story from the playoffs and wouldn't be a thing, but he did well in that first game. Then he got injured though, unfortunately. He's on the IR. But I think that's an opportunity in your fantasy league to grab him and stash him in your IR, and then you have dibs when he comes back. So I would take a look and grab him, especially like he's good for hits. So if he's available in your Bangers league right now, just grab him for free, stash him in your IR, and then figure it out later if he's worth holding. Okay, let's end the show with a couple quick goalie takes. Cam Talbot got injured in Friday's game versus the Sharks for the Wild. He's had a great start to the season, 925 save percentage in his first 4 games, so hopefully he's okay. I haven't seen any updates today. I might have missed something, but yeah, check Roto World for the latest update on Cam Talbot. In the meantime, Kaapo Kakkonen has also looked great, right? In his 2 appearances, he led in only 2 goals on 41 shots for a 951 save percentage. Minnesota is playing San Jose today, so we'll see how that goes. Right now, it's 1-0 Minnesota for what it's worth. Kakkonen's made 10 saves on 10 shots. So I feel like grab Kakkonen, right? If you need a goalie while Talbot is hurt, why not grab Kakkonen? He could just keep doing what Talbot was doing. It's a great spot. Like Minnesota's always been known for being a team that protected their goalie really well, which made it all the more frustrating that Devin Dubnyk still couldn't perform well, even on a good defensive team. But it seems like Kakkonen and Talbot are much better than Devin Dubnyk at this point, and I'd be all over Kaapo Kakkonen if I could find him in my league, at least for a short-term add and potentially long-term. Maybe he can still start once Talbot is healthy.
I mean, you're setting a low bar being better than Devin Dubnyk. It's like
Yeah, for sure.
You can walk over that, but if frankly you can skate over it. Yeah, I'm interested in Kakkonen until their schedule turns towards 4 straight games against the Colorado Avalanche, and then maybe I'm not so interested, right? Like I eyed Cam Talbot to start the season for the 8 games that they've got against the California teams to open things up. And then after that, it's that 4-game stretch against the Avs. So I think it's a situational play with these guys. And so you can get a little bit of runway out of Kakkonen, and then maybe you keep him on the roster as a spot start, or you move on to something else.
Yeah, so with goalies this year, it's going to be like super unpredictable. So Kakkonen is someone, at least for now, grab him, and then see what happens with Talbot. And also, once Minnesota plays Colorado for 4 games, you're right that maybe those might be games where you don't necessarily want the Minnesota goalie. Another guy, this would be a little bit deeper, but obviously intriguing right now, is Kevin Lankinen on Chicago, who has played 3 straight games now. We went into the year with a 3-headed monster, Subban, Delia, Lankinen, and like there was really no way to know who was going to be the guy who would end up as the starter, if anyone. And we actually had a guy on our show, William Nadeau, who knows his stuff when it comes to goalies, and he called it. He said he thinks Lankinen is going to be the guy at some point, and it hasn't taken long. And now we've got 2 straight wins for Lankinen. Fair enough, they've both been against the Detroit Red Wings, and it might be tougher when he goes against different teams. But at this point, we've got a starting goalie, right? And Kevin Lankinen, he's a free agent in most fantasy leagues. So if you need a starting goalie, grab Kevin Lankinen. There's obviously a risk that he's going to blow you up because he's on the Chicago Blackhawks, but he's looked good so far in his 3 games. I'm very interested to see what he can do the rest of the way and see if he can, stave off Subban and Delia, which shouldn't be too difficult to do, but also to see if he can actually put up decent numbers when he plays tough teams behind this Chicago Blackhawks defense.
Yeah, I mean, Lankinen, he's legit, but we're like, what are we talking about here? This is like, Chicago's terrible.
Yeah.
We're talking about the prettiest pig at the market. Like, it's just, you'd slap all the lipstick on Lankinen. Like, it's not, I don't know. I'm not going there.
Yeah. I mean, like some leagues are scored differently, right? So if it's mainly about wins, I don't know if Lankinen is your guy, but if it's about saves, or like I'm in one league with even strength save percentage as a category, and he's actually been really good in that. A lot of the goals he's let in have been shorthanded. So in some formats, Lankinen is definitely worth a look. And of course, we do have to mention Pius Suter, who had a hat trick today from his plum spot on the top line with DeBrincat and Patrick Kane. Like I was already planning on bringing him up before. Like I have evidence, right? Like I shared my doc with you last night, Steve, and Suter was on there just to say that, like, okay, this guy's on the top line. You probably want to stream him in. Now probably he's going to see a big surge in Yahoo, and then maybe get dropped by a bunch of people the next game if he doesn't get another goal. But either way, like if you're in a deep enough league, you want the guy playing with Kane and DeBrincat. Like those are 2 guys who are going to figure out a way to get points even on the Chicago team. And so you'd think Pius Suter is going to get at least some assists and now potentially even some goals. He's shown us a bit of a flair. This is a guy who's not a nobody. Like he was the MVP of his Swiss league last year. And now he comes in and just had a big game. So go grab him. We cleared out the fridge, and now he's another guy you want to definitely throw in there if he's available.
Yeah, I think you're just going to be chasing your tail with him and Dylan Strome all season, like because they're going to be throwing that top line deployment around all year, and Strome's getting the top power play unit. So, I would lean towards just hanging on to Strome or just avoiding the situation altogether.
That's fair. To be honest, I might disagree with you there. I might go Suter over Strome, but it depends on the deployment for sure. I could see Suter bumping Strome potentially from the top power play, but this is all just speculation. Finally, Washington. So Samsonov is one of the players who is away with this COVID protocol breach. So he'll be back next Saturday, I believe. In the meantime, he hasn't had a great start to the year, right? Only an .868 save percentage in his 2 games versus Buffalo and Pittsburgh. Now he's missing time. Vitek Vanacek, meanwhile, has been pretty good. Like, well, he's been okay. I guess he had one good game against Buffalo a couple days into the season. I don't know. I actually don't really have much to say here because it doesn't seem like Vanacek is amazing. He took the loss today versus Buffalo, but it also might not be the case that Samsonov is amazing. So I don't know. I think a lot of people are grabbing Vanacek right now, and I'm curious to know, maybe like my hot take would be, while everyone else is grabbing Vanacek, I'm grabbing Kakkonen or maybe even Lankinen.
I'm going to ask you a mildly personal question.
Please.
Open book. When we could go to work, how did you commute to work?
I would walk.
You would walk. Okay, so this is not going to land. A lot of people drive to work.
I've heard this.
And then what happens when their car is in the shop? They usually ride the bus, or maybe they ride their bike, or they walk. But what happens when the car comes back from the shop? Do they stick with the biking program or the rental car that they picked up? No, they go back to their regular car. So Vanacek is your alternate commuter, and Samsonov is your regular commuter.
That's fair. Yeah, maybe the big takeaway is just not overreact to Samsonov having a couple bad games and missing time. I wouldn't be surprised if his percentage owned in a lot of league has gone down just because people are frustrated. But that's just an opportunity for you savvy fantasy players to grab Samsonov, because you're right, he's going to be the starting goalie there. They had a plan that maybe Lundqvist would get some games, but now with him out of the picture, it should be Samsonov's net. I'd love to see Craig Anderson get a game in before Samsonov comes back. That would be fun. Okay, and then I have to end the show with your favorite team, the Edmonton Oilers. So they're playing today, and we saw some new line combinations, which makes sense because things haven't been going that well. It looks like finally Zach Kassian is taking a turn off of the top line. We'll see how long that lasts. And in the meantime, I've got a tweet here from Jack Michaels saying in today's practice, McDavid was playing with Nugent Hopkins and Jesse Puljujärvi. So we're going to get a shot of seeing what Puljujärvi can do on that top line. I know a lot of people are very excited about it. Some people drafted Puljujärvi and have been holding on, just waiting for this moment. Do you think this is going to be as exciting as what these people are hoping for? Obviously you can't predict, but as an Oilers fan yourself, do you think this is the right move for them? And do you think Puljujärvi has some staying power and could potentially do something and finally become fantasy relevant after 5 years of people being excited about him and him not doing anything?
I mean, it's worth a shot. I'm not a huge Puljujärvi guy. I think that he is an NHL talent. He's certainly physically talented, and it seems like his time overseas he's grown in that time, and he's a more effective player. And frankly, when he was not a very effective player, he was still putting up almost 3 points an hour when he got time with McDavid. So this could be an explosive time, but I think that it's always going to be a revolving door because they don't actually have the full-on solution. And Puljujärvi, he could be an excellent stream, and he could go off for a little bit. Like, McDavid's been producing chances like crazy, both at 5-on-5 and on the power play, and they're just not going in to the same degree that we would expect. And whether that's the weird chips in the pucks and everything's not bouncing right for them, or just the randomness of that a 5-game sample can be, it is what it is. I don't think Puljujärvi is going to be on that top line for the full season. I think it's going to be a revolving door. I think we're going to see every single mediocre scrub that the Oilers have to offer take a turn on that line, because that's what happens, because they don't actually have another first line player to play with McDavid, and that's just going to be the reality of it. It was interesting to see before James Neal came back, Puljujärvi got a flash of power play time with the top unit, and he ended up having a shot go off his foot and bounce directly to Draisaitl, and they actually scored a power play goal, so he got a power play point out of it. I don't think he's the answer to the net front guy on the top power play unit. I'm thinking James Neal probably is that guy. They went back and forth between him and Chiasson, depending on who was hot all of last season. It'll probably continue to do that this season. What do fantasy owners do with this? Stream Puljujärvi, don't commit to him, and be ready to be frustrated, because that's where I am.
Okay, yeah. So worth a shot, but you're not losing your mind over this opportunity, because he can get bumped by Josh Archibald.
Oh no, I'm losing my mind.
Okay, I guess you got to. I'll tell you, I'm a Koskinen manager in a couple of my leagues, and it hasn't been that fun yet. I don't know what I was thinking, but at least he's playing every game. That's useful in fantasy. But
that's not what you want from Koskinen. Koskinen is very much the 1A. You want him starting 60% and no more than 60%. If he starts more than 3 games in a row, his game just starts eroding. He is so tall, so that I think that there's an upper limit on how tall you can be and be effective as a goalie, unless you're pure torso. But clearly he's got very long legs, so he's got all these holes that will randomly open up, and the more games he plays in a row, the more out of sync he gets, and the more these holes just start opening up, and you're like, how'd that go in? He just completely goes off the rails the more he plays, and it's just, you got to keep him tight and compact and not overextended, and that's not the type of goaltending situation that they set up. Mike Smith is, I can't even understand why they went there again. And I guess they tried to get Markstrom, and that would have been friggin' awesome because that guy has looked like a solution for Calgary. But yeah, it's I don't know. I think that whenever they have a second goalie to play, I think Koskinen's going to be reasonable because the Oilers' power play is going to start clicking eventually. They're going to score some goals. There's going to be some wins for Koskinen, but for God's sakes, don't play him 7 games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was actually pretty decent when he was pretty much splitting time with Mike Smith. Mike Smith wasn't so great. Who's even the backup now? Is it Stuart Skinner? I don't even know who's
Oh
in there.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if we'll see him in a game at some point. But okay, Steve, this has been so fun. I could just chat with you about hockey all night. You asked me how long this would be. I said 90 minutes, and now it's been a bit longer. So I do apologize, but I so appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge. You're such a great pinch hitter. You step in, and it's as if we've been podcasting forever. Love having you on the show. If people want to hear more from you, they're in luck because you have your own podcast and you're releasing great episodes all the time with really cool interviews. So why don't you tell people where they can find your awesome podcast?
yeah. Hopefully on every podcatcher that is out there, the Steve Laidlaw podcast is available, and I'm also found on dobberhockey.com with that podcast. We've got a little bit of a podcasting network starting to develop over at Dobber Hockey, but you guys are proudly the first here. So I want to thank you for having me on, Elon, and shouts to you for walking to work. That's an excellent way to commute.
Well, you know, I thought I was making a smart life decision because I moved to downtown Toronto. So I've got like a 20-minute walk to get to work, and it's really great. And also, downtown is a lot of fun until COVID happens. And now it's like I'm stuck in my small apartment that's overpriced. And anytime I go outside, there's like a million people everywhere. So I have to be always afraid that I'm going to run into someone with COVID. So it was really good until around a year ago. And then it's kind of fallen off my life decision. But hopefully in the future, it'll get back to where it was at one point. But yeah, this has been
Well,
so fun.
I'm sorry for bringing it up.
I mean, whatever. I can't complain. I'm a very lucky guy because I get to talk to cool people like you about freaking fantasy hockey. And so good luck to everyone in, I guess, only week 2. If you're playing on Yahoo, it's been a very long week 1. So it'll be fun whether you won or lost to actually go and play in a different week, get all your acquisitions back for the week. If you are trying to figure out who to add, like hopefully we've thrown a lot of names at you. You could also check out the Stream Scheme podcast hosted by Dave Betton that we just dropped. And I'll link to that in our show notes. He does a really good job of just looking at the schedule for the following week and telling you who you can add that might give you those extra games that will put you over the edge. But yeah, so Steve, this was awesome. What else should I say? Follow us on Twitter at Keeping Karlsson. Follow Steve at Steve Laidlaw. We've got a Patreon program. We'd love for you to check it out. KeepingKarlsson.com/patron. It's all linked in the show notes. So why don't I cue that outro music? I'll read the outro credits, which is mainly just thanks a lot to Steve for his awesome brain and for Dobber Hockey for all of the stats that I used. And I guess Roto World a little bit. And of course, Yahoo. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. And until next time, remember that fantasy hockey is for everyone. Boom. What a show.
Clean out your fridge.
Clean out your fridge. That'll be the episode title. You know that Weird Al song, Living in the Fridge?
Oh, God. So my first ever concert was Weird Al when I was
awesome.
like 6 years old. That I think I was like the peak market for Weird Al.
He was my favorite as well. I actually have a very vivid memory of my mom got me and my brother tickets for Weird Al, and then we were like waiting in line to get in, and it was a first come first serve. Like there weren't assigned seats, so we got there early to get our good seats to see Weird Al from up close, and then she like forgot the tickets at home, and so she like rushed home to get the tickets and left us like the ticket holder person was just like babysitting my brother and I while she was like driving home, and apparently I was like sobbing and crying because all these people were going in ahead of us, and I was just seeing all the seats fill up, and so we ended up getting a seat. It was still a great show, but I just remember being I feel so bad for my mom. She probably felt so terrible, and it's like she did this nice thing to buy us these tickets, but
yeah, that's the nightmare situation.
We still got in, and he was
best laid plans.
He's so cool because he wears like different costumes for every song. He's like
Hell yeah.
Gaga on steroids.
Yeah. I have vivid memories of him doing Fat and the whole band dressed up in sumo outfits.
Is that song like inappropriate nowadays? Would that song not go over as well? Like making fun of fat people? I feel like that's not as cool.
I feel like back then. Almost every Weird Al song would like come out inappropriate.
Oh, well.
But like, I don't know. Fat shaming's stupid. But don't be mean, but also like, I don't know, you should be allowed to talk about like being fat not being a good thing.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know. There are lines here, right? Like you don't just relentlessly go around yelling at people for being
I
fat,
think that,
but at the same time, like you should be able to joke about it.
I mean, I think that Weird Al would have probably not released that song now, but it's a classic. And I mean,
I'm sure he has other songs that he regrets more, but
that's
that's what the comedians are doing. You're supposed to be able to go there.
He might also be regretting it because Michael Jackson is kind of canceled at the moment. But now, I guess we're a bit off the rails. So, thanks again, Steve. Good luck in all your fantasy leagues. Thanks also everyone who joined for the live show. By the way, Ben, Ryan, Kyle, Dylan. Sorry I didn't respond. Normally, like I could respond more because like Brian's talking and I could sort of, but I wanted to focus on the conversation a bit more since we had a special guest. So, but yeah, thanks a lot for being here and adding to the conversation. I'll post this episode later tonight. I'll edit it, and this was awesome. I just had such a good time. I could keep talking. Do you want to go over all the box scores right now? Just talk through how everything is going. Or should I let you go?
Oh my god.
Okay, I'll let you go.
Sounds like pain.
It sounds like
sounds like pain.
That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to do it by myself.
Yeah.
All right. See you.
I'll be doing it and just tearing my hair out.
Oh yeah, of course.
All right. Have a good one, Elon.
Bye.